State versus Madden, CR 22-121675. The jurors are not present. The defendant is present with counsel, Mr. Wilder, and Mr. Burris, Mr. Holland, Detective Portman are present on behalf of the state of Ohio. Before the jurors come in, is there anything to put on the record on behalf of the state?
There is not anything. I just need, if I can, I was going through the exhibits real quick.
Oh, sure.
So,
Okay.
nothing on behalf of the state of Ohio.
Anything on your behalf, Mr. Wilder?
Not at this time.
Okay.
You just give me one
Sure.
second.
So our witness here?
I guess you're right. Yeah. You want to admit and want to say?
That's good. Do that.
Okay.
I haven't read it.
Turn the door, please.
Screen down.
Just go ahead and be seated for the time being. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you again for coming in early today. Does anyone have any violations of the court's recess instructions that they need to report? Okay. All right. As you'll recall, we left in the middle of Detective Trenum's testimony. And Detective, I would remind you that you are still under oath. And Mr. Burris, you may resume your examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Good morning again, sir.
Morning, sir.
All right, I think the last thing that we left with was, I think I was getting ready to have you identify a couple of swabs.
Yes, sir.
So if I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Yes, sir. I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibits 232 and 233. We'll start with 232 first. Can you tell us what State's Exhibit 232 is?
State's Exhibit 232 are swabs that I obtained from the green-colored vest jacket from the marker number 1 in the photographs from the lower left region of the red stain on the clothing.
court's permission, I'd ask to publish State's Exhibit 114. It's already been admitted.
Permission is granted.
Is this on the two-screen thing?
Right,
Yeah.
You can log down, Mr. Malcolm. We'll get this fixed.
It's 'cause it's on the screen. Go to the left. You want this in the slideshow?
All right, on State's Exhibit 114, Detective, can you show us where you took the swab that is contained in State's Exhibit 232?
Yeah. So, this region here, and that's where I obtained the swabs from the red stain on that clothing item.
Okay. And then, with the court's permission, I'd ask you to go ahead and open State's Exhibit 232.
Permission is granted.
Okay.
All right, and what is what you're holding in State's Exhibit 232?
Again, these are sterile cotton swabs that are prepackaged and sealed. Upon swabbing the red staining, I broke the seal, applied 2 drops of distilled water to each cotton swab, swabbed the red staining, put it back in this container, and then put it in an envelope to be sent off and examined by BCI.
Okay. And then State's Exhibit 233. What is State's Exhibit 233?
State's Exhibit 233 is the same swabs as 232, but from a different area. It's from marker number 2, the red staining above the tear within the fabric of the same article of clothing.
And with the court's permission, I'd ask you to open State's Exhibit 233.
Permission is granted.
And 233, again, prepackaged sterile tip cotton swabs. I swabbed the red staining in this area, identified on this article of clothing as number 2, in the same manner as number 1. Distilled water on the cotton swabs, swab the red staining, put back into its prepackage, put in this envelope, and then sent off to BCI for further analysis.
And if you would, Detective, I know you testified a little bit about this yesterday, but if you could refresh some of the recollections of the jurors. What sort of training have you undergone in order to take swabs like this from items of evidence that you just described?
So I've actually taken an online training that was presented by the Ohio Attorney General's Office and by BCI with their clear instructions of how to properly collect and swab samples such as these according to their policies and procedures. So I'm following the policies and procedures that BCI would employ at their crime lab, but I'm doing it so with the instruction from them, from the training I received here in-house at our headquarters.
Okay. And then, if I can approach the
You may.
or at least the area of the witness. So you said you took a swab from this area right here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the other one is from this area right here.
Yes, sir.
Is there a particular reason, or why did you pick those two areas?
I had actually collected swabs from all 5 identifiers on the front of the clothing, and I had taken the sterile scraping of the dry substance on the back of the clothing. When coordinating with BCI about what they felt was best to initially submit, they wanted me to just submit the swabs from identifier number 1 as State's Exhibit 232 and swabs from identifier number 2, State's Exhibit 233, along with submitting the entire article of clothing. So that was their recommendation.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily your decision. It was sort of a collective effort of many individuals in order to determine which swabs to send up there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then when swabs are taken from items of evidence, like we see in State's Exhibit 114, what do you do with the swabs?
I package them sterilely and submit them online through a portal to BCI, and
Okay.
it is transported up to BCI.
I would assume that, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
It's hand delivered.
Okay. And I assume once those items are taken, once those swabs are taken from the item that's contained in State's Exhibit 114, I assume those swabs are kept at the Hamilton Police Department, like in a property room?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay. And again, that property room is secure. Only certain people would have access to the property room?
Yes, sir. I don't even have access to the property room, so I turn it over to another individual who securely has access.
And then the items would be taken to BCI by, I believe it's a rotation of different detectives. A detective each week would take any items up to BCI that need to be taken?
Yes, it is hand delivered by one of us to maintain that chain of custody.
Okay. And with the court's permission, if I can display State's Exhibit 132. I think it's already been admitted.
No, permission is granted.
All right, so what are we looking at here in State's Exhibit 132, Detective?
After I collected swabs from each of the identifiers on the clothing, I then applied Blue Star in the same manner as I did in the sink in the bathroom at 1270 Parish Avenue to this article of clothing. Again, it appeared to me that the red staining on the article of clothing resembled that of blood. I applied Blue Star to see if I would get the same reaction as I would have in the sink and get the same chemiluminescent reaction as an indication for the potential presence or likelihood of blood being present. And when I applied Blue Star to identifier number 1 here, that was the reaction that I received, that there was a high likelihood that the red staining on the article of clothing was blood. I also applied it to be able to show the contrast between the stain and the color of the green jacket. It was kind of hard to see in its natural state. So this highlights the difference in location of where I obtained the swabs as well.
Okay. And you would have taken the swabs first
Correct.
and then applied the Blue Star?
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit 133. What are we looking at here, Detective?
It is the same application of Blue Star, but it is on identifier number 2. I apologize, you can't see the identifier number 2 as clearly as number 1, but that is because the clothing item had folded when I was spraying it. But again, this is where I took swabs prior to the application of Blue Star and got the same reaction as I observed in number 1.
134.
This is identifier number 3 on the same clothing item. Again, with the application of Blue Star, I received the same chemiluminescent reaction, indicating that there was a high likelihood of blood being present from the area of where I obtained the swabs.
And then 135.
Identifier number 4, again, same reaction of Blue Star from the area where I collected the swabs from this particular location on the same clothing item.
And then 136.
Number 5, again, collected swabs from this general area, administered Blue Star afterwards. We've seen the same reaction for the high likelihood of the presence of blood.
And then 137.
137 is the rear of the clothing item behind the left armpit. This was not a swab. Again, number 6 was a red stain, a substance that had dried and flaked. And so I took a sterile scalpel. Again, it's prepackaged like you would the cotton swabs. And I was able to scrape that off into a druggist fold paper, package that into an envelope, much like the ones for States Exhibit 232 and 233. Once that was collected, I still applied Blue Star, got the same chemiluminescent reaction for the high likelihood that blood was present.
And if I may approach the witness room.
You may.
And Detective, what I would ask the court's permission, and I believe you've already identified States Exhibit 211, but I'll have you take out 2 of them, please. And I know some of the tags have fallen off.
Yes.
So with the court's permission, if I can have the detective step down, and I would ask him to point on the actual exhibit itself where region number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are.
Permission is granted.
So again, a lot of the identifiers have fallen off because I manipulated it, BCI has manipulated it, they've done their own analysis, it got sent back to us, we did another reanalysis of some areas. Stage 1, still present in the lower left region of this general location. 2, again, the general location of the cut mark. 3, as you can see, is still attached. It is right here on the chest pocket with the zipper. 4 is over here, lower right region. 5 was upper right region. And then if you flip around to 6, on the rear, the left armpit, right here where I'm indicating with my index finger, is where number 6 I covered from.
Thank you, Detective. If I may approach the witness room.
You may.
And Detective, I'll hand you what's marked as States Exhibit 218. I guess if you would, Detective, can you tell us what is in States Exhibit 218, the first bag I gave you?
You want me to remove it from the bag?
Yes, please.
Okay. States Exhibit 218 is a dark colored gray button-up shirt. It was recovered on the second search warrant conducted on the residence. However, it was located during the first search warrant on the residence, but we did not know its interpretive value. We did not know it was evidence
Okay.
until the second search warrant on the residence where we recovered it.
Okay. And if you hold up State's Exhibit 218 with the court's permission.
Permission is granted.
It's a short sleeve, button-up Dickies gray shirt.
Okay. Thank you, Detective. And I'll probably be asking you to hold that here in a second. If I can direct you to the exhibit book. I'm going to ask you to look at State's Exhibits 138 through 146.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And generally speaking, what are we looking at in State's Exhibits 138 through 146?
States Exhibit 138 through 146 are photographs that I collected of the same shirt that I just showed before you, where I identified numerous evidence of red staining on this clothing item. I did not identify all because there were too many, but there were numerous where I was able to locate on this gray shirt.
All right, in State's Exhibit 138 through 146, are all those photos that you took?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Are those photos true, fair, and accurate as to your visual observations you were making of this gray shirt when you took the photos?
Yes, sir, they are.
Your Honor, I would ask that 138 through 146 be admitted and permission to publish.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, they'll be admitted and they may be published.
All right, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 138?
States Exhibit 138 is the gray shirt, and you can see that's just a photograph of it in its natural state.
And I know that you and I have talked about this before. I know when looking at the photo, the shirt kind of looks green, doesn't it?
It does, yes, and that could be because of the lighting that we have at the department.
Okay, but the picture that we're looking at in State's Exhibit 138 is in fact the shirt that is on the floor behind you, on the ground behind you, which is State's Exhibit 218.
Yes, sir, it is. It's the same shirt.
Okay, and I guess with the court's permission, if you'd like to stand up and show the different tags. So I know there's a tag up top and there's a tag towards the bottom of the shirt there.
Permission is granted.
You can see,
If you'd like to stand in front of the shirt, please.
inside the collar, at the bottom of the shirt, with the same manufacturer identifiers.
Okay. And inside the collar there is also Dickies and,
There is
let's say Dickies and Flex.
Dickies Flex.
Okay. Thank you, Detective.
Yes, sir.
I don't think the tag fell off there, did it? All right, State's Exhibit 139. What are we looking at here in State's Exhibit 139?
This is the same shirt, but just generally, these are the locations where I identified what appeared to be blood stains, or red stains, if you will, on the front of the shirt. It is not all of them. It is just what was most apparent.
All right. State's Exhibit 140.
It's a close-up photograph. Same. It's showing identifiers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the right-hand side. Or sorry, that would be the right-hand side in the photo, but it's the left side of the shirt. And then 19, 20, and 21 on the right-hand side of the shirt, but it's the left-hand side when viewing the photograph.
State's Exhibit 141.
This is the upper portion of the shirt with also the left sleeve. You can see number 5 there in the lower portion of the photograph connecting the two images. Again, it's just another picture of the different identifiers that I had marked on the shirt.
State's Exhibit 142.
And this is showing the right sleeve and the identifiers that I marked there that appear to resemble that of red staining or blood.
The right sleeve, but the left side of the...
The photograph, yes, it is. Yeah, you have to flip it in your mind.
All right, 143.
So these are close-up photographs of certain markers that I identified, number 2, 3, and 5. You can see the red staining in more detail.
State's Exhibit 144.
And this is the right sleeve. Well, yes, the right sleeve, but in the photograph it looks like it's on the left side, where you have identifiers number 13 and 14 that were marked.
State's Exhibit 145.
This is the back of the shirt, as is in its natural state.
And 146.
And this is where I identified just generally 3 locations of where that red staining appeared to be. As you can see now from the back, the right sleeve is on the correct side of the screen, it's on the right side. And then the left side over there, identifier, this one would be on the left side on the shirt.
And if I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm going to hand you what has been marked State's Exhibit 234 and 235. And what is State's Exhibit 234?
State's Exhibit 234 are swabs of the red staining that I collected from identifier number 3 on the front of this same shirt within the lower left edge.
And then State's Exhibit 235.
And 235 are blood swabs taken from identifier number 14, which was the right sleeve of the shirt on the front portion.
All right, so in State's Exhibit 140 that's on the screen behind you,
Yes, sir.
worded swab, which is contained in State's Exhibit 234, where did that come from?
From this location, identifier number 3.
So left side of the shirt, but right side on the State's Exhibit.
Correct.
Okay. And then where did swab 235 come from?
235 is going to be in a different State's Exhibit photograph because it's on the right sleeve.
Which one? Oh, I'm sorry.
Probably 142, probably.
Yes. So State's Exhibit 142. I have 13 and 14 on the right sleeve, but 14 specifically was this location here. Swabs of the red staining that are contained within State's Exhibit 235.
All right, and I assume that, or actually, again, explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury here, what it is you did to take swab. The swabs are contained in State's Exhibit 234 and 235. Explain how it is again that you did that.
Yes, so it's done in the same process as the swabs from the green vest. I collected them individually and separately. So State's Exhibit 234 was collected, again, with prepackaged sterile cotton swabs, where distilled water was applied to the cotton swabs. I swabbed that area of staining, collecting it, putting it back in its prepackaged container, putting it in an envelope to send to BCI, and 235 was collected in the same manner, but from a different and separate region. It was collected from number 14 on the shirt.
And I assume that this would have been done at a different time than the jacket to make sure that there was no cross-contamination that was done.
Yes, absolutely. I believe everything was collected and swabbed on the same day. However, the jacket was swabbed and collected first, repackaged, I changed PPE, I reapplied PPE, gloves, and then handled the shirt separately away from the green vest, so there was no cross-contamination issue.
And what is PPE?
Personal protection equipment, gloves, goggles, masks.
Okay. And then with the court's permission, I'd ask the detective to be allowed to step down with State's Exhibit 218, and I'd ask him to demonstrate on the actual exhibit, since probably several of the flags have fallen off, on the actual exhibit itself, where State's Exhibit 234, where that swab came from, and State's Exhibit 235.
Permission is granted.
So some of the stickers that are in place on the shirt have been moved, so the stickers that you can see, don't think that that's where they are. Whatever's in the photograph, that's where they are. These things get jostled around, as you can see once it's fell. So State's Exhibit 234, very faint, but you can see here, as it wraps around the left side of the shirt, which would be kind of the side where you have the seam. That's where that swab was collected for that State's Exhibit. And on the front here, number 14 was right here on the right sleeve of the shirt. And differentiate. Different. Number 13 was up here, but number 14 was back here towards the cuff of the sleeve.
Great, thank you, detectives. And again, how was it decided that those would be the two swabs? Swab 234, or swab that's in State's Exhibit 234, and the swab contained in State's Exhibit 235. How was that decision arrived at to send, or to swab those areas and or to send that up to the lab?
Again, I spoke with the analysts and scientists at BCI. I gave them the pictures and documentation of this shirt, and it was their determination that
Okay. Sustained.
In consultation with BCI, is that why it is that you sent up those particular swabs?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. I think you have the book. You have the books in front of you. If you would please flip to State's Exhibits 158 through 166.
Okay.
And generally speaking, what is it that we're looking at in State's Exhibits 158 through 166?
So these series of State's exhibits were conducted after BCI had performed their analysis. Okay? And there's a particular reason why I say that, and we'll get to that. But these are photographs that I collected of the green vest here in State's Exhibit 158, which we will more closely view the tear in the green vest jacket.
Right, so generally speaking, these are, again, photos of the green vest jacket?
Yes.
Okay. Are those photos that you took
Yes, they are.
true, fair, and accurate depictions of what it is that you were looking at when these photographs were taken?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now I'd ask that 158 through 166 be admitted and permission to publish.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay, they'll be admitted and they may be published.
All right. And Detective, what is it that we're looking at here in State's Exhibit 158?
State's Exhibit 158 is the green vest jacket. It's just kind of like an overview of the tear next to identifier number 2.
If you would, so in these photographs, we're going to be looking at the tear that's in the vest, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and circle the tear it is that you're visually seeing in State's Exhibit 158. State's Exhibit 159.
So this is a close-up photograph of the tear. Now, in order to be able to take this photograph and represent it as best as I could as the fabric naturally lays and be able to see the uniqueness of that tear, I had to insert a piece of printer paper between the front and the back of the clothing item so you could actually see what that tear looked like as it laid flat. Otherwise, it would blend in with the background of the vest through the tear. You wouldn't see it as well.
And these photographs were taken well after these items were sent off to the lab for testing, and they were brought back to the Hamilton Police Department?
Yes, after the department and the prosecutor's office had spoke, we had decided that there was no more analysis to be performed by BCI, and that we were given permission to handle said items in this manner.
State's Exhibit 160.
So, State's Exhibit 160.
And let me stop you there, Detective, if I may approach the witness.
You may.
Yes.
I believe we looked at this yesterday, but State's Exhibit 215, again, what is State's Exhibit 215?
State's Exhibit 215 is the Swiss Army knife or multi-tool knife that was recovered from the residence.
Okay. And what is it that we're looking at in State's Exhibit 160 then?
I was asked to see if there was any correlation between the first blade attachment, where the blade was broken in some manner, and see if it correlated in any way or resembled in any way the tear that was observed on the green vest jacket.
Okay. And that's why it is you took this particular photograph?
Correct.
Okay. State's Exhibit 161.
Again, this is just another angle of how this uniqueness of the defect of the blade could have some similarities within the tear within that clothing.
162.
So again, with permission to handle these items in this manner, I inserted the knife between the front of the green vest jacket and the rear to be able to show maybe how the uniqueness of the blade defect could have caused this tear in this jacket, and is lined up as so.
State's Exhibit 163.
That is the orientation in which I took the photograph as observed in State's Exhibit 162, the one you just saw before. So that's how it was oriented and aligned as best as possible.
State's Exhibit 164.
So, State's Exhibit 164, again, with permission to handle said items of evidence, we aligned the gray shirt inside of the green vest as one would normally wear it to see if there were any correlations as to how it was aligned on someone's body if being worn together.
State's Exhibit 165.
And as you can see, I have then aligned the blade again to kind of demonstrate that uniqueness of the tear in the green vest jacket with the gray shirt inserted between.
And then 166.
And as an overall view of all the items combined with the blade itself having been inserted between the clothing items to kind of show the edge of the blade as having cut through the green vest.
All right, thank you, Detective. And then you have the exhibit book in front of you. I'd ask you to look at State's Exhibits 167 through 176.
Okay.
And generally speaking, what are we looking at in State's Exhibits 167 through 176?
These are photographs of the deceased victim's shirt where multiple tears were observed. And again, I was asked to see if there were any similarities with the multi-tool and specifically with the first blade attachment with the defected blade to see if anything lined up.
Again, are those photographs that you took
Yes, they are.
true, fair, and accurate depictions of what it is that you were looking at?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I'd ask the 167 through 176 be admitted and permission to publish.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. All right, they'll be admitted and they may be published.
If I may approach the witness.
You may.
All right, what are we looking at here in State's Exhibits? This has already been admitted 210.
State's Exhibit 210 is the deceased victim's shirt.
Okay.
As observed in the photograph above.
Right. So then what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 167?
That is the victim's shirt laid out flat as best as possible. It's the front of it.
State's Exhibit 168.
State's Exhibit 168 is a tear within the victim's shirt. Again, I was asked to see if there were any similarities between any of the tears in the victim's shirt with that unique first blade attachment of the multi-tool or Swiss Army knife.
State's Exhibit 169.
So that is a close-up view of one of the tears. I identified it as tear number 1 in the photograph, as State's Exhibit 168 depicted. This is a close-up photograph of this.
State's Exhibit 170.
This is with that multi-tool, and the first blade attachment has the piece that's missing from the blade aligned with the tear in this fabric.
State's Exhibit 171.
This is a second tear. I identified as tear number 2 within the victim's shirt.
All right, and if I can approach the witness.
You may.
If you're able to, Detective, in State's Exhibit 210, can you show us on the actual shirt itself, State's Exhibit 210, where that photograph is taken of?
Yes.
And with the court's permission, I ask the detective to be able to step down and show the jury.
Permission is granted.
Front of the victim's shirt.
If you need help, let me know.
photograph from this tear right here that I'm identifying. As you can see, my thumb, that specific one is number 2.
Is that the bottom left part of the shirt?
It is. It is.
You can go and step down to make sure all the jurors are able to see that.
Again, I had to insert a piece of printer paper in the front and the back of the shirt so you can better visualize the layout of the tear when that's laid flat.
And State's Exhibit 172.
It's a close-up photograph of the tear identified as number 2 in the previous exhibit.
State's Exhibit 173.
And this is how it was aligned when that first blade attachment with the piece missing in the multi tool appeared.
State's Exhibit 174.
This is tear number 4. That's on the victim's shirt.
And with the court's permission, Detective, are you able to show on the shirt where exhibit number 4, the arrow is on the shirt?
Give me a minute, I have to look through them all.
And if you're not too sure, that's okay.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much of the court's time. It is fairly difficult to relocate. Oh, no, I have located it. Identifier number 4 is actually a tear, which would be on the left side of the victim's shirt. You can see here's a swing with my thumb. So it's not necessarily on the front of the shirt. It's more towards the left side. Like the oblique or the waist would be. Again, to view it as best as possible, insert a piece of printer paper so you can see it in contrast with the background color of the center.
Thank you, Detective. State's Exhibit 175.
Again, this is the tear identified as number 4 in the previous exhibit, but with the same blade attachment kind of aligned above the tear in the fabric.
And State's Exhibit 176.
And the same tear identified as number 4, but with the blade attachment not aligned above, but over top of the tear in the fabric.
All right, thank you, Detective. And if I may approach the witness stand.
You may.
Go ahead. I think we're done with this stage. So we can- I think I neglected to ask you, going back to State's Exhibit 234 and 235, I believe you identified those as swabs that you took from the gray shirt. With the court's permission, if I can ask you to first open State's Exhibit 234.
Permission is granted.
Okay, 234, State's Exhibit, again. Prepackaged sterile swabs, cotton swabs, that were taken from region number 3 of the gray shirt. Okay, so that was kind of like the lower left portion of the gray shirt. Again, I applied a couple drops of distilled water to each swab, rubbed the red staining, put the cotton swabs back in its original packaging, and prepackaged it in an envelope to be sent to BCI.
And then State's Exhibit 235, with the court's permission, I'd ask you to open 235.
Permission is granted.
And State's Exhibit 235. Same process of collection of the red staining as State's Exhibit 234. Prepackaged cotton swabs, distilled water applied to each swab, collected from the red staining of region number 14, which would have been the portion of the right sleeve on the front near the cuff. That was then put back in its original packaging, put into an envelope, and sent to BCI.
And likewise with the other two swabs, 232 and 233, those would have been kept at the Hamilton Police Department in property room.
Yes, sir.
And again, only certain people would have access to that property,
Yes, sir.
and it would have been taken up to BCI for testing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think the ladies and gentlemen of the jury have heard a little bit about this, but Detective, were you assigned to a breaking, entering / burglary type offense that allegedly occurred at 1270 Parish Avenue on, I believe the date would have been October 6th of 2022?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Tell us how it is that you were assigned that particular case.
The defendant, Toby Madden, had made a offense report to Officer Bryant that I had been assigned for follow-up.
And what do you mean by follow-up?
I was assigned to reach out to Mr. Madden to kind of identify if there were any alleged suspects involved with the breaking and entering of the residence at 1270 Parish Avenue.
Okay. And what methods did you use, or how did you attempt to make contact with Toby Madden as a follow-up?
Yes, so on the offense report that P.O. Bryant had filed, he had gathered.
Objection, can we have a sidebar?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. I believe my question was, what methods or how did you try to make contact with Toby Madden?
So using the information from the report, phone number, address, I attempted to make contact by calling the listed phone number on the offense report to speak with Mr. Madden. I received no answer after calling twice. I then left my business card with my name, identifying that I was a detective with the City of Hamilton Police Department at the residence
What, 1270 Parish?
of 1270 Parish. The report, though, indicated an incorrect address for Mr. Madden. Said he resided at 250 Brookwood Avenue, which is not a good address for the defendant. The offense report was made for 1270 Parish Avenue. That's where I had responded to in an attempt to speak with Mr. Madden and leaving my card. After having left my card, I still never received a call or a contact from Mr. Madden himself, and I made the case inactive until further, until he made attempts to reach out to me.
If I can have probably 2 or 3 moments, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Give me 1 second, Mr. Miller. I believe that's all the questions I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Good morning, Detective.
Good morning, sir.
I want to talk to you with this, the alleged burglary incident you just spoke of. Is there a chance you didn't have the correct number when trying to contact Mr. Madden?
To be honest with you, whatever number I was given was the one I attempted to make contact with. I received no contact. That's why I made a personal appearance to drop my card in case the number was wrong.
Okay.
He could contact me with the correct number.
Sure. But my original question is there a chance you had the wrong number?
Yes, the phone number could have been documented incorrectly by the reporting officer.
And the reporting officer on that was Taylor Bryan, correct?
Yes, sir.
And did you review his report before you came into court today?
Yes, I've reviewed that report.
And were you, at the time, were you a detective assigned to that specific burglary that occurred 5 days before?
Yes, I was.
Is it your understanding that Officer Bryan responded to the scene
Yes, he did.
and took photos?
Yes, sir.
And does his report indicate that there was damage to the back door?
Yes, it does.
Did you have any contact with anybody else at 1270 Parish, such as Rachelle?
No, I did not.
And you never spoke or saw Mr. Madden in relation to the burglary 5 days before?
No, sir.
Did you yourself go out to 1270 Parish and look at the property or the door at all?
I didn't. No, I don't. I try to make contact with residents there before going to the back of the residence, make my appearance known that, hey, I'm law enforcement. I'm not somebody just wandering about in the backyard. So I did not go to the rear of the residence and inspect the damage as reported.
Okay.
I just went to the residence to try and make contact with a homeowner or a resident there.
Sure. And Detective, you can't do every single thing possible on a case. Sometimes you have to rely on reporting officers or patrolmen to do certain things for you and give you this evidence for you to follow up on if you need to. Is that kind of fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to start with regards to the incident that ends up happening 5 days later, the knife, if the state would mind, since they're connected to the overhead, if you could put 150 up for me, please. Yeah. Detective, where did this knife come from within the parish residence?
It was located within the deceased victim's black backpack.
To your knowledge, was that black backpack, was it zipped up or buttoned up in any way?
I can't recall if it was zipped up or secured in any way.
Okay. Now, you testified that you observed this knife and you thought that there may be some sort of residue or some sort of wiping on this. Is that what you testified to?
Yes.
Now, you've shown us the fluorescent blue star that you used on other things, the sink, we saw it on the vest. Why did you never use the blue star on this knife to see if there was presence for blood on this?
That's because, again, this was a critical piece of evidence. So you kind of have to weigh the results of some tests being performed versus what your results may be. Knowing that this was a critical piece of evidence that might have minimal but sufficient important evidence to this case, I did not want to interrupt any DNA typing or analysis conducted by BCI by introducing Blue Star. Blue Star is a tool, it's a screening tool that you can use if you have sufficient evidence to use it. Here, I did not want to use it on such a critical piece of item of evidence. I just wanted to document it and submit it to the lab so they could do their own analysis in a more sterile environment.
I thought you testified, though, about Blue Star, that doesn't interrupt blood presence if it's there. I thought you said that to us.
Yes, you are right. It does not interrupt DNA typing or analysis. But again, you want to be able to have sufficient evidence to document the presence of blood. And on such a small knife blade, I don't want to apply Blue Star by overspraying and causing any DNA or blood that could have been present to fall off of the blade onto the sterile cardboard sheet below, and therefore losing that value of any evidence or potential evidence.
Okay. And the determination and maybe the conclusion of whether or not this blade has blood on it, that's for a DNA expert from BCI. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Were there any photos of this knife sent to the coroner?
If there were, I did not send them. I do not know.
Okay. That wasn't something you were involved with?
No, sir.
You weren't recorded. The coroner referenced maybe possibly having a photo of a knife, but you're saying you weren't involved with that?
No, sir, I was not.
Did you attend the autopsy?
No, I did not.
Is it a common practice for someone within your department or your agency to attend the autopsy?
That depends upon the coroner. I guess it's a case by case. Sometimes we're allowed to attend, and sometimes we're not allowed to attend. But I did not attend.
To your knowledge, within the residence during these searches, were there any rags, towels, paper towels covered in blood recovered?
Not that were apparent or observed at the scene.
If the state could please pull up 77. Detective, this is one of the exhibits that you testified to, I believe it was yesterday. So the fluorescent that we're seeing here is indicating that there's blood that was present at some point. Is that fair?
Yes, it is a screening tool that gives you with a high degree of certainty that within the fluorescence that there is a high likelihood that blood is present.
Okay. And you would agree with me that a sink is normally a place where you're going to wash your hands, correct?
That is correct.
And would you agree with me that if you had placed your hands on someone's body to perhaps give CPR, that you might end up with blood on your hands?
That is correct.
Are we able to tell from this fluorescent imaging whether someone washed their hands, but then they try to wipe any and everything away from the sink? Can we tell that from this image?
No, I don't see any apparent, if you're asking for like smears or wipes.
Because what I want to ask is if someone washed their hands in this sink and there's blood that falls in the sink, the water takes most of the blood down into the sink, but then someone wants to then take a rag, kind of wipe the bowl out, wipe the edges. Would this fluorescent that we see in States Exhibit 77, would it appear differently? Would it have swirls and motions like that for the blood?
I don't know if it would or not, to be honest with you. I just know how to detect its presence and recognize its appearance with the reaction. I don't know if it would show a smear.
Okay. Well, during your training with Blue Star, do they not cover something like that, that we can not only detect where blood has dropped, but we can also tell if someone has tried to wipe blood away? Is that not part of the training?
No, I'm sure you could be able to indicate if something has been wiped up. But specifically, no, that was not covered in any of the trainings that I was a part of.
All right. So you're telling me this picture is going to appear that way, whether the blood just was washed off hands, went down the sink, or if someone sat there and you literally used a towel to try to wipe everything up. You can't tell us if this picture would be different if someone tried to wipe all that away?
Oh, no, I'm sure it has the possibility of appearing different, yes.
Just a possibility? You don't think it would show swirls in this picture if someone used a towel?
I haven't been a part of any type of practical examination of that,
Okay.
but it is possible, yes.
You were involved with some of the searches at the property, correct?
Yes, I was there.
Were you involved with the search of Rachelle's car at the residence?
I did not search the victim's car.
Okay, so you would not be aware that rifles were found inside her car?
I was not a part of that search.
If the state wouldn't mind putting Exhibit 160 up. I want to talk to you about State's Exhibit 160. You were talking about the knife, and you were talking about some of the cuts within the vest. You've handled not only the vest and the knife. You've seen pictures of it. You were there. You've analyzed it. Would you agree with me that the vest and the knife are not new?
Are not new.
Meaning like they don't appear that they were recently purchased. They appear old. It's not like they were 1 week old, like they've just been bought.
I can't date the appearance of clothing when it was purchased versus if it's worn, and same thing with a knife.
All right, well, you can't tell does that knife appear to be new?
No, it doesn't appear to be brand new, but I'm not going to date it.
Does that appear to be rust on the knife?
Yeah, there could be indications of rust on the knife.
I mean, common knowledge, rust doesn't appear just overnight, right?
Right.
Takes a long time.
Again,
Just off
Yes.
your common everyday knowledge, with the things you have in your house or you've been around, it takes a long time for rust to set in. Is that fair?
I would say it does take time for rust to set in.
Okay.
Yes.
When you're testifying about the cut in this vest, you said you had to put a piece of white paper underneath it to see it, correct?
Yes, because the background behind the cut is the same as the foreground, so it blends in. So yeah, I had to put a piece of paper in between so you can see the actual layout of the tear in the fabric.
So this, in order to find this cut and to look at it, you had to get pretty close to it. Is that fair?
Yes.
So if there was an angle from a Kroger video up on the ceiling, there's a chance it might not capture a cut that's in a vest. Is that fair?
That depends on the quality of the camera.
Well, true, but you do agree with me that you need a piece of copy paper just to see the cut up close, right?
I think it highlights the difference. It contrasts it. You can see the cut. I could pull the article of item out, and the jury and everybody here would see the location of where the cut is. But to see it more thoroughly as what its design is, you need to highlight and contrast the differences between the front of the vest and the back of the vest. So
And we don't know how long that cut's been on that vest. Is that fair?
I don't have any way to date how long that cut's been there.
All right, that's all. Well, give me 1 second to confer. Nothing further, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect?
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Let's see here, if that's all right.
Sure.
Sir, did you do any kind of blue star illumination on the back door or near the back door?
No, I did not.
Was there any thing you did to try to observe or find out if there was any blood or other evidence at the back door?
The back door was locked with both doorknobs. I didn't have an indication that it had been opened at the time that I responded for the first search warrant on the day of the incident. So no, I did not.
But you were aware that 5 days before a burglary had been reported at that back door?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect?
Again, it was just reported, there was no follow-up that was able to be done because you couldn't make contact with them.
That is correct.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Thank you, Detective. You may
Thank you,
step
Your Honor.
down. Is the state ready to call its next witness?
First of all, I believe Detective Trenum can be released from the state subpoena, although Mr. Wilder would like him.
I'm sorry, Judge. I'm not.
Detective Trenum be recalled?
No.
Okay, I just want to release him from my subpoena. No, this might be a good, I know it's a little early, this might be a good mid-morning break time because I think the next witness is going to be very late.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's go ahead. Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and take our break. It's about 9:40. We'll take 15 minutes and come back at 9:55. Please remember my recess instructions. Okay, the jurors have been excused from the courtroom. Before we take recess, I did give out jury instructions on Monday. As we're getting further along in the case, I'd like counsel to be prepared to have our first discussion about those at the conclusion of the state's case. I anticipate we'll have additional conversations, but just to get a start on that after we've at least heard the state's case. Other than that, is there anything from the state before we take our break?
I anticipate 2 more witnesses, Catherine Daly from BCI and Tanya Cook.
Thank you for that. Mr. Wilder?
Judge, are we still on the path of stopping at 12 like yesterday? Is that still
Yes, sir.
today?
Yes, sir.
And that includes anything, even with instructions or other things, we're dropping at 12?
Pretty close to. If we need just a few minutes, I can
Okay.
spare that, but any lengthy discussions we'll have to have tomorrow.
Okay.
And to be, well, no, nothing else, Your Honor.
Okay, all right. We'll be back then at 9:55. Thank you. First, Mr. Hahn and Detective Horton are present, and Mr. Wilder is present with Mr. Madden, who appears in person. Before the jury comes in, is there anything on behalf of the state of Ohio?
Just the next witness, Catherine Daly, does not wish to be filmed. I've already got that.
Very well. Anything else, Mr. Wilder?
Not at this time.
Okay. Okay, please be seated. Are there any violations of the court's recess instructions that anyone needs to report? Okay.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. The state of Ohio would call Catherine Daly.
I do. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Appreciate you being here. Would you please state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
Yes, my name is Catherine Daly. First name is spelled Kathariene. Last name Daly, Dailey.
Okay. And where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigations. It's commonly referred to as BCI.
Okay. And what is BCI?
BCI is a law enforcement agency that will assist various other local law enforcement agencies in the investigation of crimes.
Okay. And is there a particular section of BCI that you work for?
Yes, I work in the laboratory section, specifically in the DNA section.
Okay. And what would be your job title at BCI?
I'm a forensic scientist.
Okay. And explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it means to be a forensic scientist.
A forensic scientist will look at items of evidence and collect samples for different types of analyses. In my case, collect samples for DNA analysis.
Okay. And in regards to your employment at BCI, being a forensic scientist in the DNA, actually, are you assigned to the DNA section?
Yes.
Okay. So then in regards to your employment being a forensic scientist in the DNA section, would you please describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your education, your background and training in order to achieve such a position?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science degree. My degree was from Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. My major was in microbiology and my minor was in chemistry. And upon being hired at BCI, I underwent a year-long training program that included mock cases, lectures, online coursework through West Virginia State University, reading of forensic articles, journal articles, and lots of other things as well.
Okay. And how long have you been assigned to the DNA section at BCI?
I started in December of 2011, so I'm coming up on 13 years.
And on prior occasions, have you had the opportunity to conduct testing for DNA on different evidentiary items that have been submitted to BCI?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many times you've run such tests?
Thousands of times.
Okay. And based on the thousands of times that you have conducted these types of tests, Have you been able to make either a positive identification or I guess not an identification based on the testing experience you have run on evidentiary items submitted to your lab?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And if I use the phrase inclusions, what does that mean to you?
If someone is determined to be included in a DNA profile, that means that their DNA profile that we obtain from a known standard is consistent with that of a DNA profile obtained from an evidence item.
Okay. And if I use the phrase exclusion, what would that mean?
That means when making those two comparisons again between the known DNA standard and a DNA profile from an evidence item, at least one of the locations that we're looking at on that DNA profile is not consistent.
Okay. And have you previously been qualified as an expert in forensic science in the courts of law, first of all, here in the state of Ohio?
Yes.
How many times would you say that you have been?
It's upwards of 80 times.
Okay. And how about outside of the state of Ohio or including the federal system? Have you been called to testify as an expert as well in either other states or in the federal system?
In the federal system, yes.
Okay. How many times would you say you testified in the federal system?
One time that I can recall offhand.
Okay. I believe you told me it was here in the state of Ohio goes in the federal system?
Yes.
Okay. And, at this point, Your Honor, I would tender Ms. Daly as an expert in forensic science as it relates to DNA analysis.
Mr. Wilder?
Judge, no voir dire for this witness, no objection.
Very well. Witness will be so qualified.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Daly, it's my understanding that you were asked to compare various items in the case that's before this court in regards to DNA, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as part of the comparison process that I'm going to have you talk about, generally speaking, can you educate the ladies and gentlemen of the jury as to how it is evidence arrives at your laboratory here at BCI?
Yes, a local law enforcement agency will bring the evidence to our laboratory, and our evidence receiving staff will take in that evidence. It's assigned a unique case number, and each item of evidence is given a unique item number. These are tracked throughout the laboratory via barcodes, and they are placed in a secure vault until analysis is to be done on those items of evidence.
Can you use it? I don't think I need to continue. And if I may approach the young lady.
You may.
And hopefully there'll be an item that's on the screen behind you. This is going to be, just for purposes, this is going to be State's Exhibit 234. And just generally speaking, there's a kind of a light purplish type label that is on this particular exhibit. Can you just explain what it is that we're looking at here? Because I know you started talking about barcodes and things like that. So what is indicated on this particular exhibit?
So this purple barcode that is on this item will tell us what the BCI lab number associated with this item of evidence in this case is. It also tells us what the BCI item number is. At the top it says item 15. It'll tell us what agency submitted that item as well as their agency case number. And this is the barcode that would be used to track that evidence item throughout the laboratory. So for instance, when I would take this item of evidence into my custody, I also have a barcode that's assigned to me. So this would track it in the computer system saying that it's in my custody.
Okay. And I would assume that each case would have a unique lab number, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then, but if there's multiple items that are submitted under the same lab number, that's how we get item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to however many items BCI winds up getting?
That's correct.
Okay. And I would assume that when items are submitted to BCI, where would they be stored? Obviously prior to testing and then stored after testing.
They're secured in a evidence vault.
Okay. And again, I assume that not just anybody has access to the evidence vault. There's only certain people who will be allowed to go into the evidence vault.
Yes, it's limited access.
Okay. And I would assume that there has to be some sort of code punched in order to go into the vault to obtain items?
Yes, in order to obtain those items, you have to scan a card as well as punch in a specific number to the individual that's trying to get into the vault.
Okay. I'll go ahead and take this down for now. So how is it that you're able to ensure the integrity of evidence that is submitted to BCI and stored at BCI prior to testing?
So when the evidence items are received by the laboratory, the seal is checked on those items of evidence, as well as when that item of evidence is retrieved for analysis, the seal is also checked and noted. If any irregularities would be noticed, that would be put in the analysis notes.
Okay, thank you. And I believe that I have used the phrase DNA, and I'm sure everybody has heard from TVs and movies about DNA, but could you please educate ladies and gentlemen of the jury here as to what DNA is and what does DNA stand for?
Yes, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is a blueprint for our bodies, so it's going to tell us things like what color hair we might have or what color eyes we might have. We get half of our DNA from our mom and half from our dad, and it's unique to each individual except for in the case of identical twins, and it's also the same throughout our body. So if I were to take a swab from my cheek and a blood sample for myself, the DNA profile developed from each of those would be the same.
Okay. Now, in regards to DNA and what it is we just testified about, can DNA be used for comparison purposes to see if you can identify samples left behind on different objects to a certain individual?
Yes, it can.
Okay, if you would explain, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how it is that you can do that.
So when we're making a DNA comparison, it's a 4-step process. The first step is going to be extraction, so we're going to take the DNA off of whatever item it was, whether it was a swab similar to a Q-tip, a cutting from an item, or a sample from like a cigarette butt. The second step that we're going to do then is quantification. We're going to determine how much DNA was obtained from that sample. Third step is called amplification, where we're going to make millions and millions of copies of certain regions of the DNA. And the fourth step is a real fancy word for taking a picture. It's called electrophoresis. So when I have those pictures at the end from both the evidence samples as well as the known reference standards, I can compare those two together and see if they are similar or dissimilar.
Okay. Now, in regards to DNA that may be left behind on a particular item, can you explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury how that might happen?
Yes, DNA can be left behind on an item a number of different ways through bodily fluids, so saliva, urine, feces, semen, blood, or it could be left behind on an item by touching it. So my DNA would be expected to be on the binder that I brought with me today.
Okay. And if I use the phrase primary transfer, what does that mean to you?
That is the direct transfer of DNA to an item. So my DNA to my binder would be primary transfer.
Okay. And then what about secondary transfer?
Secondary transfer would be if someone came and picked up my binder other than myself. And if I were to try to swab their hands, they may or may not have my DNA on their hands because of that secondary transfer.
Now, in regards to internal lab protocols at BCI, what efforts are made to prevent cross-contamination or mixture of substances or samples that you may test?
So there are a number of different precautions that we take at the laboratory. Just to name a few, only one item of evidence is open at a time, so we're only looking at one item of evidence. We will also use a bleach solution to bleach down our worktops. We use brown paper to serve as a barrier between that bleached benchtop and the item of evidence. We also wear personal protective equipment, so gloves, masks, lab coats, just to name a few things.
So in essence, you're not going to be testing multiple items at a time, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I assume every time an item is tested, all surfaces and utensils will be cleaned before testing another sample?
Yes, absolutely.
And I assume that those are the protocols that BCI puts in place specifically for all employees to follow to make sure there isn't any sort of cross-contamination or anything like that.
Yes.
All right, so now in regards to DNA, what is the methodology that is used for determining if a particular item does have any DNA on it? And if it does, take us through the process, and I think you talked about it a little bit, of extracting that DNA from that item.
Yes. So initially the item is received by a forensic biologist, and the forensic biologist is someone that's going to look at the item of evidence and collect any relevant samples. So they're going to look at potential bodily fluids, see if they can perform any testing to try to help determine what that bodily fluid might be. They'll collect samples from either bodily fluids or samples where someone might come into contact with an item. So shirts, maybe the way they wore it, so they'll swab the shoulder areas that come into contact with your skin. If it's something like a cigarette butt, they might take a cutting from the paper around the cigarette butt. And those samples are then placed into a tube and they are sent forward for the DNA analysis process. The DNA analysis process is that 4-step process that I mentioned earlier.
And go ahead, and just the different names of the process.
Yes. So first is extraction, second is quantification, then amplification, and then electrophoresis, where we get a picture of the DNA profile at the end.
So what is it that you're actually doing to the sample that you have in order to extract the DNA?
We are applying certain chemicals to that sample to help remove the DNA off of whatever the substrate was that it was on, whether it was a swab or a piece of paper, and get it into the solution so that we can look at just the DNA itself.
All right, and we're going to get into this here probably very shortly, but with that process, with that process that you do with the items that they're going to be compared, there's probably two different phrases that we're going to talk about. So what is a known sample?
A known sample is a sample collected from an individual, so the origin is known. So we can use that DNA profile obtained from that item as a reference standard for comparison to any unknowns.
Okay. And then what's an unknown sample?
An unknown sample is a DNA profile that is obtained from evidence items within the case.
Okay. Like the items that have been submitted to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. So then in regards to known samples that BCI would receive and unknown samples that BCI would receive, would you be able to compare those known samples to unknown samples to see if there is a match?
Yes.
And I assume when you make that type of comparison, whether they're known samples or unknown samples, do you generate or author a report to document what your findings are?
Yes.
Okay. And I assume that those reports are generated in the ordinary course of business by BCI?
Yes.
And those labs would be, or those lab reports would be kept in the ordinary course of business at BCI?
Yes.
Okay. And would you have done that in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And when you compare DNA samples, or unknown samples to known samples, are you able to calculate a statistical frequency of a particular DNA profile?
Yes, we will calculate statistics on the evidence profile to show how rare or how common it is within the population.
Okay. And if I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
239 and 240. Ma'am, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 239 and 240. What are State's Exhibits 239 and 240?
These are copies of the reports that I authored in this case.
Okay. The true, fair, and accurate, is that, actually, let me ask you this, is that a copy of your report?
Yes,
Is that a true, fair, and accurate copy of the report that you would have generated?
yes, it is.
Okay. And would that aid you in your testimony today?
Yes.
Okay. So now we have several things to go through. All right. If I may approach the witness, Your Honor. I'll have you identify what State's Exhibit 222 is, please.
State's Exhibit 222 is BCI item number 1, which is a DNA standard from Ms. Brewsaugh.
And I think that is the only one that has not been opened. Can I borrow your scissors? Okay, approach the witness, Your Honor.
Right. And what is contained within State's Exhibit 222?
State's Exhibit 222 has a blood card from Ms. Brewsaugh.
And I'm going to ask you to open that second envelope as well. And I'll take this from you. All right, so 222, if I can have it. Does that have a similar label that it is that you talked about before, item number 1?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and we have the unique laboratory number 22-19832.
Correct.
I'll take that from you. And does this card that is inside, does that have any markings that you're familiar with or that you recognize?
Yes, it does.
Okay, what are the markings that you recognize?
The markings on this item have the BCI lab number, our item number, and the individual's initials and date of the individual who took the samples, as well as what date the samples were taken.
And then State's Exhibit 223.
State's Exhibit 223 is BCI item number 2, which is a DNA standard from Mr. Madden.
And if you would take out what's inside, and I will put the envelope, I didn't ask the court's permission before, I have permission to publish
Yes.
223.
Yes, granted.
And on the screen to your left, again, do you recognize any of the numbers or markings on that?
Yes, this is the barcode for BCI item number 2 under BCI case number 22-19832.
And then what is contained within State's Exhibit 223?
There are 2 manila envelopes in here, and they have swabs within them.
Okay. And I believe this particular one, just open, would you mind taking that out, please? Did you recognize, or are there any markings on that particular exhibit that you recognize?
Yes, on this exhibit, there are the same markings as before from the analyst who took the sample from this item.
And permission to publish, Your Honor.
Permission is granted.
Is that what we're looking at here on the screen?
Yes, it is.
All right, so speaking now about State's Exhibit 222, the blood card for Miss Brewsaugh, and 223, the swabs from Toby Madden. These would be what are known as known samples, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And are these two items, the 222 and 223, are those items that would have been tested by BCI?
Yes.
Okay, and let's start with 222, the blood card from Miss Brewsaugh. Were you able to develop a DNA profile from that blood stain card?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And with that DNA profile, would that have been developed using the procedures outlined for the ladies and gentlemen here?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess if you would, now that we're talking about an actual sample, if you would, just go ahead and briefly explain to them the procedures again as to how you develop a DNA profile from them.
Yes. So in this instance, a tip of the swab would have been cut into a tube, and it would have been sent forward for the DNA analysis process. So it would have been undergone the extraction process, quantification, amplification, and electrophoresis. And then I would have used that picture of the DNA profile to make my comparisons to any profiles developed from evidence items.
And from State's Exhibit 222, the blood stain card, were you able to develop a DNA profile?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And if I use the wrong word, please correct me. And then in regards to State's Exhibit 223, the swab from individual identified as Toby Madden, were you able to develop a DNA profile from that particular item as well?
Yes.
And you would have used the same procedures that have now been outlined twice by you in order to generate a DNA profile?
That's correct.
Okay. And you were able to develop a DNA profile?
Yes.
Okay. So now that BCI has a DNA profile from Ms. Brewsaugh from the blood stain card, and now has a DNA profile from Toby Madden from the swab, are you now able to, I guess, compare those particular items, the blood stain from 222, the DNA profile, and the DNA profile from 223, are you able to compare that to unknown samples?
Yes.
Okay. And then by comparing those known samples to unknown samples, that's how you're able to either include or exclude.
That's correct.
Okay. And if I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
Now I'll hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 224. Can I have you identify what State's Exhibit 224 is?
State's Exhibit 224 is BCI item number 3, which is a envelope containing Ms. Brewsaugh's left hand fingernail clippings, as well as a fingernail clipper.
And if I may display State's Exhibit 224.
You may.
And again, do you recognize any of the labeling on State's Exhibit 224?
Yes, I recognize the BCI barcode as well as the individual's initials and date when they collected the sample from the item.
Okay. And much like the procedures that you use to develop a DNA profile from 222 and 223, would you have done something similar to State's Exhibit 224?
Yes,
Okay. And were you able to develop any sort of profiles on that?
yes,
Okay, and then let me ask you this. Were you able to come to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty? Do you have an opinion as to the DNA profile that was found in State's Exhibit 224?
yes.
Okay, and what is that opinion?
It is a mixture of DNA profiles, so that means there's more than one individual contributing to the DNA on the left-hand fingernail clippings, specifically a swabbing from a stain. The major DNA profile, or the individuals that is contributing a higher concentration or a higher amount of DNA, that DNA profile is consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Mr. Madden is not that major contributor, and the additional DNA on that item is not of sufficient quality for any comparisons.
Okay. And is there a statistical analysis or a statistical breakdown as to the frequency of Ms. Brewsaugh?
Yes, the DNA profile, the major DNA profile from the fingernail clippings, specifically the swabbing from the stain, the estimated frequency of occurrence of the major DNA profile is rarer than 1 in 1 trillion unrelated individuals. So that means I would have to test a number larger than 1 trillion individuals to expect to find this DNA profile again in the population.
And certainly there's not a trillion people in this world, are there?
They are not.
What does it mean to be a major contributor, and obviously what does it mean to not be a major contributor?
A major contributor is an individual that's contributing a higher concentration or a higher amount of DNA in the sample compared to any other contributor or contributors.
State's Exhibit 225. Have you identified that, please, ma'am?
State's Exhibit 225 is BCI item number 4, which is an envelope that contains Ms. Brewsaugh's left-hand fingernail scrapings.
Okay. And what is the difference between, if you know, fingernail clippings versus fingernail scrapings?
My understanding is in the method of collection, a scraping is what it sounds like, scraping underneath someone's nails, versus a clipping is similar to how you or I would clip our nails.
And I was going to put this up here. State's Exhibit 225. Has that been admitted, Your Honor, officially?
No, it's been identified but not
Okay.
admitted.
I guess I probably should have asked for 224 to be admitted to 225. And I'll go ahead and housekeeping matters 226 and 227.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay, those will be admitted.
I apologize, Your Honor. And again, this has a similar label number.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Item number 4, similar lab number 22-19832.
Correct.
And was this item, although BCI received this item, did you analyze this item in any way?
No, this item was not examined.
Okay, is there a reason why it wasn't examined?
We looked at the fingernail clippings first.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 226. Can I have you identify State's Exhibit 226?
State's Exhibit 226 is BCI item number 5, which is a envelope containing Ms. Brewsaugh's right hand fingernail clippings and a fingernail clipper.
Okay. And again, item number 5 is similar label, similar lab number 2219832.
That's correct.
Okay. And did BCI, and did you do an analysis on State's Exhibit 226?
Yes.
Okay. And again, based on your training, education, experience, and your analyzation of State's Exhibit 226, do you have an opinion as to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty as to whose DNA is on this item?
Yes, they do.
And what is that?
The DNA profile from the right hand fingernail clippings, specifically a sample from the stain, is also a mixture of DNA profiles. The major profile is consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Toby Madden is not the major contributor, and the additional DNA on this item as well is not of sufficient quality for comparisons.
Okay. So we have no idea whose DNA that might be.
That's correct.
Could that still be Toby Madden's DNA?
I can't make any conclusions regarding who the contributor of that additional DNA is.
And then State's Exhibit 227. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 227?
Yes.
And what is State's Exhibit 227?
State's Exhibit 227 is BCI item number 6, which is an envelope containing Ms. Brewsaugh's right hand fingernail scrapings.
Okay. And were these analyzed by BCI?
They were not.
Similar reason why the left fingernail scrapings were not analyzed?
That's correct.
Bloods for this one. All right, State's Exhibit, for the record, 213. Do you recognize that particular exhibit?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that particular exhibit?
State's Exhibit 213 is BCI item number 7.
And I'll take that from you real briefly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that has a similar barcode and label as the other ones do. Item number 7, 22-19832.
Yes.
If I can have you take out what is in State's Exhibit 213, please. And what sort of analysis was done on that particular exhibit?
This item was examined for the presence of possible blood. No blood was identified on this item, as well as 2 samples were taken for potential DNA analysis. However, those were not sent forward for DNA analysis.
Okay. But there was no blood that was found on that particular white foil.
That's correct.
State's Exhibit 215. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 215?
Yes, I do.
And what is State's Exhibit 215?
State's Exhibit 215 is BCI item number 8.
And what is BCI item number 8?
BCI item number 8 is a knife multi-tool.
And if you would, please open up State's Exhibit 215. And that also that's an item that was received by BCI.
Yes, it was.
And what sort of testing were you asked to do on the Swiss Army knife or the multi-tool knife?
The multi-tool knife was looked at for the presence of potential bodily fluids, specifically for blood. Each area that was tested on this multi-tool knife was negative, so no blood was identified. There were 4 different swabbings taken from different areas of the knife.
So let me stop you there. With the court's permission, I'd ask for the witness to be able to step down and show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where in particular the knife was swabbed.
Permission is granted.
Or if you prefer, if you want to do it on the overhead, either, whatever one is easiest for you.
Go over there.
Whichever is easier for you, yes.
Okay. So there were 4 areas of the knife that were swabbed. One of the swabbings was taken from this broken blade here. That is BCI item number 8.3. There was a swabbing of the handle, the red portion. That was BCI item number 8.2. There's a swabbing from the interior portion where this blade would have rested inside. And that is BCI item number 8.4. And then there's another blade that was also swabbed as BCI item number 8.1.
Okay. And all the opinions I'm about to ask you about, based upon your training, education, and experience, and within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty. Okay, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And what findings did you make on State's Exhibit 215, BCI item number 8, the Swiss Army knife or the multi-tool knife?
Yes. So BCI items number 8.1 and 8.3, the swabbing from the blade as well as the swabbing from the broken blade, the DNA profile obtained from those items was not of sufficient quality for comparison due to insufficient data. So simply put, there just wasn't enough DNA present to make any conclusions regarding that DNA profile. The DNA profile from the swabbing of the handle had the same conclusions. There was not enough DNA present to make any conclusions regarding the source of that DNA. And lastly, BCI item number 8.4, which is the swabbing from the interior knife from the broken blade where that blade sits deep down inside. The DNA profile from that sample was a mixture of DNA profiles. So again, more than one contributor is contributing to that DNA profile. The major DNA profile was consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Mr. Madden is not the major DNA profile, and there is additional DNA present, but I cannot make any conclusions regarding who could be the source of that DNA as well.
Is that an unusual place to find DNA on the knife to you?
In my opinion, yes, somewhat, because as you saw, it's a very hard place to even get your fingers down into. However, if someone's handling the knife on a regular basis and opening and closing that piece, their DNA might be transferred there.
State's Exhibit, let me make sure. State's Exhibit 217, item number 9. If you wouldn't mind telling us what that is, ma'am.
Yes, BCI item number 9 is a shirt.
You can go ahead and take the shirt off if you would, please. And what sort of tests were conducted by BCI on this particular item?
BCI would have looked at the stains on the shirt and tested those to see if they would be presumptive positive for blood. And there was also a sample collected from the stain to be potentially sent forward for DNA analysis.
And what findings were there on the shirt?
The stain from the shirt was presumptive positive for blood. The sample that was collected was not sent forward for DNA analysis.
All right, State's Exhibit 231. And what is State's Exhibit 231?
State's Exhibit 231 is BCI item number 10, which are swabs from a bathroom sink.
And likewise, this item, do you recognize the labeling on State's Exhibit 231?
Yes.
And what do you recognize?
It has the unique BCI barcode with the BCI item number and case number.
And the item that is contained within State's Exhibit 231, do you recognize any of the markings on this as well?
Yes, this has the BCI item number as well as our unique case number, as well as the individual's initials and dates of when the samples were collected.
Okay. And would an analysis have been done on this particular item, State's Exhibit 231?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to identify any DNA profiles contained on State's Exhibit 231?
Yes. The
And
sample.
I assume that you would use the same procedures that you've outlined before?
Yes, I did.
And based upon your training, education, and experience, and based upon a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what results did you conclude as to whose DNA is contained in State's Exhibit 231?
The sample was presumptive positive for blood. The DNA profile was a mixture of DNA profiles. The major DNA profile was consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Mr. Madden Mr. Madden is not the major contributor, and there's also additional DNA present that I cannot make any comparisons or conclusions regarding who might have deposited that DNA.
So it could be Mr. Vans, it could not be Mr. Vans.
That's correct. I can't make any conclusions.
State's Exhibit 232. And what is State's Exhibit 232?
State's Exhibit 232 is BCI item number 12, which are swabs from a green jacket, the left lower region.
And again, you recognize the label that's on State's Exhibit 232?
Yes,
Item number 12, lab number 22-19832.
correct.
And the item is contained within State's Exhibit 232. Do you recognize any of the markings on this?
Yes, again, it has the BCI lab number, item number, and initials and date from the individual that collected the samples.
And this is an item that you would have tested or analyzed as part of your duties with BCI?
Yes, that's correct.
And were you able to develop any, or able to ID, I'm sorry, were you able to develop any DNA profiles?
Yes,
All right, and then again, based upon your training, education, and experience, and with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what conclusions did you come to?
the DNA profile, the sample from that item was presumptive positive for blood. And the DNA profile obtained from that item was a mixture of two individuals. The major DNA profile is consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh, and the minor DNA profile is consistent with Mr. Madden.
And what statistical probabilities did you come up with on those?
For the major DNA profile, the estimated frequency of occurrence of that major DNA profile is rarer than 1 in 1 trillion unrelated individuals. As far as the minor DNA profile, the estimated frequency of occurrence of the minor DNA profile is rarer than 1 in 1 trillion unrelated individuals.
Thank you. State's Exhibit 233. What is State's Exhibit 233?
State's Exhibit 233 is BCI item number 13, which are swabs from a green jacket, the middle left region.
Okay. I assume you recognize the label that's on 233?
Yes,
Item number 13, lab number 22-19832.
that's correct.
And do you recognize any of the markings that are within State's Exhibit 233?
Yes, this contains the similar markings of the BCI case number, item number, and initials of the individual who collected the samples.
And what sort of analysis was done on State's Exhibit 233?
These samples were tested for the potential to have blood. They were presumptive positive for blood, and no DNA analysis was performed on these items.
In State's Exhibits 234 and 235. Do you recognize those items?
Yes, I do.
And what are those items?
State's Exhibit 234 is BCI item number 15, which is swabs from a gray button shirt, the lower left edge. State's Exhibit 235 is BCI item number 16, which is swabs from a gray button shirt, right sleeve front.
And do you recognize the markings on State's Exhibit 234?
Yes,
Again, item 15, lab number 22-19832.
yes,
And do you recognize the markings on what is contained within State's Exhibit 234?
yes.
And what markings do you recognize?
Yes, there is the BCI case number, item number, as well as analyst initials.
And were you able to analyze State's Exhibit 234 and attempt to ID any DNA profiles?
Yes.
Okay. And based upon your training, education, and experience within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what were your findings in regards to State's Exhibit 234?
The sample from the swabs was presumptive positive for blood. There was a mixture of DNA profiles on this item. The major profile is consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Mr. Madden is not the major contributor, and there's also additional DNA present that I cannot make any conclusions on.
And what is the statistical analysis on State's Exhibit 234?
The estimated frequency of occurrence of the major DNA profile from the swabs from the gray button shirt lower left edge is rarer than 1 in 1 trillion unrelated individuals.
And I know you've already identified State's Exhibit 235. This is the one that needs to be opened. And then this is
It's open.
Is it? Okay. Hold on. I thought I had opened it. On State's Exhibit 235, again, do you recognize any of the labels on this?
Yes, it has the BCI barcode on it.
Item number 16, lab number 2219832.
Correct.
And do you recognize any of the markings on what is contained within State's Exhibit 235?
Yes, it has the BCI lab number, item number, as well as analyst initials and date.
And were you able to analyze this particular item in regards to trying to identify any DNA profiles?
Yes.
And again, the same procedures that you've been talking about throughout your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And based upon your training, education, and experience to within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what were your conclusions?
The sample from the swabs from the gray button shirt, right sleeve front, they were presumptive positive for blood. There is a mixture of DNA present on that item. The major DNA profile is consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh. Mr. Madden is not the major contributor, and there is also additional DNA present that I cannot make any conclusions regarding the contributors.
And then lastly, I believe there was one other item that you were asked to look at. State's Exhibit 216. And what are we looking at inside of State's Exhibit 216?
State's Exhibit 216 is BCI item number 17, which is a cigarette.
And was that an item that was tested by BCI?
Yes.
And based upon your training, education, and experience to within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, what were your findings in regards to the cigarette?
There were 2 samples collected from the cigarette butt. One was a swabbing of the cigarette, and the second was a cutting from the paper that would have come into contact with someone's mouth if they were to smoke that cigarette. The swabbing from the cigarette butt was not sent forward for DNA analysis. However, the cutting was. The DNA profile from the cutting was consistent with Mr. Madden.
Was there a statistical probability on that one as well?
Yes, the estimated frequency of occurrence of that DNA profile from the cutting of the cigarette butt is rarer than 1 in 1 trillion unrelated individuals. And I should also mention that Ms. Brewsaugh is excluded from that sample.
Ms. Daly, I think I had you identify States Exhibits 239 and 240. So States Exhibit 239, is that a lab report that you would have generated?
Yes,
And the date of that report would be December 1st of 2022?
that's correct.
Okay. And then it's my understanding that at a later point, the cigarette was delivered to your lab for testing, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's what would have made you generate a second report, which would have been 240, is that correct?
That's correct.
Because that would have contained the findings from the cigarette, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then explain the difference then between States Exhibit 239 and 240.
States Exhibit 239 would have included also items that were not examined, items that had DNA profiles that were developed that were not sufficient for comparison, and it also contained all of the bodily fluid testing within that report. Those are things that would not be carried forward to a second report.
Okay. So 240 is kind of a summary. And the date for the States Exhibit 240 is February 21st, 2024. So States Exhibit 240 would essentially contain a summary of 239 with the addition of the findings in regards to the cigarette.
Yes.
If I can have one more. I have another question, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination.
Good morning, Ms. Daly.
Good morning.
I have a few questions for you. I want to first, I know Mr. Burris went through everything with you, but I just want to kind of summarize if I can real quick with you. So you still have your report with you?
Yes.
So I want to start just to kind of go back over some of this, make sure I'm clear. So you analyzed the left-hand fingernail clippings of Rachelle, correct?
Yes.
And you were not able to make any conclusions of whether Toby Madden's DNA was within her left-hand fingernail clippings. Is that what you said?
He is not the major contributor, and I can't make any conclusions regarding the additional DNA that is on that item. So I can't include, exclude, or even call it conclusive.
Okay. And is the same, is that the same for her right-hand fingernail clippings as well?
Yes,
You were given 2 knives, correct?
that's correct.
One of the knives, it looks like item 7, no blood on that knife at all. Is that, am I reading that right?
The sample from the blade was tested for potential blood, and that was negative.
So did you get just a swab, or did you get the actual knife to look at?
We had the knife.
Okay. But one of the folding knife, no blood on, just to come back to that, right?
No blood on the blade.
Okay. And then the knife, your item 8 says knife, multi-tool. Is that what you stood in front of the jury with?
Yes.
There was no blood found on that, correct?
Yes. The samples that were tested for blood were the swabbing from the blade, the swabbing from the broken blade, as well as the interior knife from where the broken blade sits.
Right. Well, my question was there was no blood detected on any of that, correct?
There was no blood identified on the samples I mentioned.
Okay. But you did say that you looks like item 8.4, there was some of Rachelle's DNA on the interior knife from broken blade. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Yes, the major DNA profile was consistent with Ms. Brewsaugh.
But what you found was not blood, or what kind of DNA was it?
The sample was negative when we did our presumptive test for blood. So as far as where that DNA came from, I can't conclusively say. It could have been from skin cells. It could have been from some other bodily fluid that wasn't tested.
Okay. That was what I wanted to know, because, and I'm probably not saying it right, but sometimes when we find DNA, it could be my blood, it could be my skin cells, it could be sweat, saliva. But you know, item 8.4 that you tested doesn't have blood.
Correct. There was no blood identified on that.
So if there's any DNA of Rachelle that's some other form, like skin cells or whatever, that's other than blood, is that fair?
Yes. I can't say what, though.
Right. Do you have any knowledge that this knife that was found was actually inside Rachelle's purse?
Yes, I did know that.
Okay. Because you said it would be unusual to find DNA on that part of the knife, but you would agree with me it wouldn't be unusual if it's a knife that's in someone's purse that they may use almost every day, correct?
I would be more expectant to find her DNA on like the exterior of the knife. So when we swab the handle, I would expect to find her DNA there. This is kind of just an odd place to find DNA, since it's really far deep down inside and you can't theoretically like even stick your finger down in there.
Right. Have you ever used the multi-purpose tool? Have you ever used one of those?
Rarely.
Well, when you saw it, do you see that there's little slivers in the top of each blade where you almost have to put your fingernail on to pull the blade up? Did you see that?
Yes.
So you're saying it would be uncommon if I'm opening that up, using my fingernail, my skin cells to pull a blade up, that it would be uncommon for my skin cells to be within the knife?
Not necessarily. Like, I would expect your skin cells to be on that portion where you're contacting it and pulling it up. But this sample was taken from deep down in that groove.
Okay. Have you ever, you yourself, have you ever used a knife to clean your fingernail beds out?
Not a knife, no.
I understand, but not everybody does things the same way. Would you agree with me on that?
That's true, yes.
Could you, I know you're not going to do that, but could you use the end of a knife such as what you looked at just to kind of clean your nail beds?
You could.
Right? Also, with regards to, I think it was the bright green shirt, you said that was positive for blood, but the steps weren't taken then to determine exactly whose blood that was. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, item 12 is a green jacket, and that's one of the pieces that you analyzed, and you said that Toby Madden was a minor DNA profile. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
For item 12? Do we know what DNA that is that you found there? Is that skin cells? Is it sweat, saliva, blood? Do we know what that was?
The sample that was collected was presumptive positive for blood. I can't say whether his DNA profile was as a result of his skin cells being deposited on that item or if it was also his blood.
And the clothes you have on today, the clothes I have on, every time I touch my coat here, touch my tie, I'm depositing DNA and cells all over my clothing, correct?
That's correct.
So it's not unusual for a piece of clothing to have someone's own DNA on it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Judge, can I have a minute to talk about one? No further questions, thank you.
Okay, any redirect?
I think I just have one redirect
Okay.
question. There was some of the DNA that you tested that you were not able to make any conclusions as to whose DNA it is that correct?
That's correct.
And why would that be?
It could be for a couple reasons. The amount of DNA that was recovered from that item doesn't give a reliable enough DNA profile, so it doesn't meet our standards for comparison. It could have also been the quality of that DNA profile doesn't lend itself for comparison, or there could have been a number of individuals contributing to that DNA profile, making it also not sufficient for comparison.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing else, Sean?
No recross.
Okay. Ma'am, you may sit down. Thank you.
Council Burke?
Sure. State may call its next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state will call Tanya Cook. If I can have a second. And my conversations with this witness, she does not wish to be recorded. I'm sorry, video.
Right. He left something on the projector.
Just need to do that a lot.
Proceed.
Good morning, ma'am. I appreciate you being here. Would you please state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
Tanya Cook, T-O-N-I-A-C-O-O-K.
Okay. Do you know an individual by the name of Rachelle Brewsaugh?
Yes,
How do you know Rachelle Brewsaugh?
we were friends.
Okay. How long have you known Rachelle Brewsaugh?
I knew her when we were younger, and then we played ball against each other, and then as we got older, because of Toby.
Okay. Are you a little nervous being here?
Just
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we move that microphone
Yes.
for the witness?
May I approach?
Yes, thank you.
We're having some difficulty hearing this, so.
Okay.
Let me, if I can ask that last question again. How is it that you know Rachelle Brewsaugh?
We are friends.
Is that better? How long have you guys been friends?
When we were younger, we played ball against each other, and then probably 5 years
Okay,
as adults.
all right. And you know an individual by the name of Toby Madden?
Yes,
You see Toby Madden in court today.
yes.
Would you please point to him and describe for ladies and gentlemen of the jury what it is he's wearing?
A blue dress shirt
Okay.
with stripes.
Your Honor, that's a record to reflect the witness has identified the defendant, Toby Madden.
The record will so reflect.
Okay. And ma'am, I want to direct your attention back to around Christmas time of 2021. Did you have contact with Toby Madden around that time?
Yes,
Did you hear him say anything about Rachelle Brewsaugh?
yes.
What did he say about Rachelle Brewsaugh?
Objection.
Overruled.
You can answer, ma'am.
He said that he would cut her head off, put it in her mom's lap, so the whole family would have to suffer.
Thank you, Judge.
Cross-examination?
Ms. Cook, that was pretty quick. Are you Toby's cousin?
Yes.
What makes you think that? She's
Our
cousin?
grandmas are sisters.
What grandma, what's her names? Those two
My
grandmas.
grandma Venerable and his grandma, they were Molly and Polly Venerable,
Okay.
or Croucher or something, I don't know the last name.
Did you get involved in this case where someone reached out to you, or did you call down the police department?
I called them.
This statement that you just say you heard, you said he was going to cut off her head and put it in his mother's lap?
Not
Or her
his
mother's
mother's, her mother's, that's before she passed away.
Okay. Who was around when he said that?
My daughter, my husband.
Who did-
He
what-
said it over and over again. It wasn't just one time, it was over and over again.
When you say over and over again, you talking about just that day?
No, just different days.
Okay. So I'm assuming you called the police, right?
When he said that,
Yeah.
no, I did not.
All right. You said he said this in the presence of your daughter. What is her name?
Haley Cook,
And you said it was in the presence of your husband?
yes.
What's his name?
Chris Cook, Warren Cook,
Where were you at when this was said?
at my house.
What were you guys doing?
Toby would sell clothes and shoes, and
Were you selling clothes and shoes inside your house?
he would bring them in his truck, and I would buy shoes from him or clothes, whatever.
Okay, so when I asked you what you were doing that day when he said this, you're buying clothes and shoes from him?
Yeah, it's depending on what day it was. Like,
Well, I'm
like
asking-
I said, he has
I'm
said
asking you
it
about
over
the day
and
that
over
he made
again.
the statement. What were you doing that day that he made this statement?
I don't know, we were maybe sitting on the couch. I don't know exactly. We were talking, sitting there.
You remember what day it was?
No,
Day of the week?
no, because he said it quite frequent. It was either he was going to stab her to death or cut her head off and put it in her mom's lap.
Where was he at inside your house when he said this?
It would be like right next to me on the couch.
All right, so he was inside your house?
Yes.
correct? And your husband was there?
Yes.
Were you drinking that day?
I don't drink or do drugs.
But your husband does though, right?
Yes.
Was he drinking or using drugs that day?
I don't know.
Well, how long have you been married to him?
22 years.
You can't tell us whether or not your husband's drunk after 22 years of being with him or on drugs?
He possibly was on drugs that day.
Did you ever take Toby to the hospital to see Rachelle's mom?
No,
Never?
never,
Did you ever take Toby anywhere to go see Rochelle's mother?
never.
Okay. Did you ever see Toby around her mother? Were you able to observe the two of them together?
No,
Did you ever see at your house Rochelle hit Toby with a stick?
what, it was a thing that you put up underneath the doorknob to keep people from coming in. He had come to the house, Rochelle was there, and I could tell by his knock that it was him. I was like, that's Toby, Rochelle. And so she got up and answered the door, and he had this stick, and he hit her with it.
Oh, he hit her?
Yep.
Did she ever hit him with it?
She took it back from, she got it from him and hit him with it
If
also.
State would put up Exhibit 66, please.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 66.
Sorry.
If you wouldn't mind. Since you're connected, my computer's not.
I was just talking to Mr. Holmes.
Can you see, is there a screen in front of you that has that, ma'am?
Yeah.
Does that look like the stick that Rochelle would have hit Toby with?
No,
It doesn't?
no, it would have bothered
Is it?
me. It was like silver.
What color is this object?
I can't tell the color of that. That's not it.
You said this thing, whatever this, that Rochelle used to hit Toby, was it metal?
Yes.
And you said it went under a door?
It was to help secure your door in your house. You stick it underneath your door. But Toby was the one that came and hit her with it first.
Right, but you're not denying that she then grabbed it and hit him, correct?
No, I'm not denying that. She did.
They had a really hot and cold relationship, didn't they?
Well, I mean, she was defending herself.
Is that a yes or no? Did they
Hot
have a
and
hot and
cold
cold
relationship? Yeah, she was trying to get away from him, so it wouldn't be hot and cold anymore.
I understand that, and I'm not trying to disrespect that she's passed. I'm going by what you saw between these two, because the reality is, on the day that she is stabbed, you don't know what happened inside
No, I
that
do
house,
not.
do you?
No, I
But
do
you
not.
do know that they have a rocky relationship, don't you?
Yes.
And you do know that she hit him with the stick, whether he used it first or she used it first. You've seen her hit him with the stick
Yeah.
that goes under a door.
Yes.
Did you ever go as far as to tell the police that Toby pulled a gun on her?
No, I did not.
You didn't do that? Judge, can I have a second?
Sure.
No further questions.
Anything else?
There you are, thank you.
Okay, ma'am, you may step down. Thank you.
The council for-
Yes, please.
On behalf of the state of Ohio, I believe this book is released from the state's.
Very well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's the court's understanding that the state has presented its last witness to you. So at this time, we need to take care of some business outside of your hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and release you a little bit early today so that we can take care of that. We'll come back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning and proceed from there, okay? But please remember my recess instructions. Please be seated. So the jurors have been excused from the courtroom, and at this time, would you like to take out the exhibits?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
So I believe State's Exhibits 1 through I think 1 through 206 have all already been admitted.
And that's what my recollection is as well. However, there is no Exhibit 177, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that takes us to 207, and go from there.
So, Your Honor, I believe the coroner's report is a self-authenticated document. It is certified. I think it comes in that way without any testimony.
Any objection?
Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
I was just catching
Sure.
up, make sure I didn't have. Yeah, you're talking about 207?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so that'll be admitted. And then I have 208, 209, 210, and 211 being admitted, 212 being identified but not admitted. That is the wallet.
Yeah, I am asking for its admission and/or photographs one way or the other. I know it's a wallet, and I think there's under a driver's license and stuff like that. So whatever the court's preference is, I can just.
You said are there photos of it?
No, I said we could either
Oh,
introduce that as an exhibit or we can take photos of it. It's going to be 212.
Just assuming your ID's probably expired, your driver's license? Yeah. You can send the wallet back. I was just making sure there's.
Okay, well, there's a dollar bill as well,
Yeah.
a couple dollar bills.
No, it's fine. That can go back.
All right, so we'll admit that.
For like social security stuff, not that.
All right.
Want to go ahead? Issue date 95. Expires 2/17/2022.
That's fine. The wallet
All
can
right,
go back.
we'll admit that. And then I have 213 as being admitted, 214 as being identified but not admitted. That is the black book bag.
I'd ask for its admission now. And probably,
Any objections to the book bag?
No.
Okay, that'll be
if I
admitted.
asked your bailiff, I've gone through it, but if the bailiff would like to go through and make sure there's, I don't believe there's anything in here that's harmful or anything, but
If you would do that, Mr. Halcom. Okay. All right. So then the next, I have 215, 216, 217, and 218 is being admitted, 219 and 220 being identified but not admitted. That would be the gray hat and the Kroger bag.
I'd ask for this to be admitted.
No objection.
Okay, those will be admitted. And then it appears there is no Exhibit 221.
Correct.
Okay. So 222 I have as being identified but not admitted.
I ask for it to be admitted.
No objection.
Okay, that'll be admitted. And then I have 223, 24, 224, 225, 226, 227 is being admitted. And I do not have 228, 229, or 230 being identified or admitted.
Correct. There will be no exhibits there.
Okay.
What were those again? I'm sorry.
228, 229, and 230.
Okay, got
All
it.
right, and then we've got 231, I have 231 as being admitted, and 232, 233, 234, and 235 as being identified but not admitted.
I ask to be admitted, Your Honor.
No objection.
Okay, those will be admitted. And then 236, I do not have a record of that being identified or admitted.
Correct.
Okay. I've got 237 and 238 as being admitted, 239 and 240 as being identified but not admitted.
I ask that they be admitted.
No objection.
Those will be admitted. I have 241 is admitted, 242 and 243 is being identified but not admitted.
I ask that they be admitted.
No objection.
Those will be admitted. And then I have 244, 245, 246, 247, 248, 249, and 250 is all being admitted.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, are there any other exhibits that we have not addressed?
Nothing other than what we discussed, and no other exhibits other than what we discussed in site court.
So with those exhibits being admitted, is the state going to have any other evidence?
The state has no other witnesses to present, no other evidence to submit, and the state would rest.
Very well. And of course, we'll let you do that in front of the jury tomorrow.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, now that the state has rested, Mr. Wilder, is there anything you'd like to put on the record?
Judge, at this time, we would make a Rule 29 motion for acquittal on all charges. I just argue that the state, even construing evidence in the light most favorable to them, have not provided sufficient evidence on all the elements of all the charges presented. Thank you, just
Thank
general.
Anything that the state wishes to put on the record?
I believe that we have put sufficient evidence forward to warrant the case go to the trial effect.
All right. All right, well, the court has carefully listened to the evidence, and considering Rule 29 and the appropriate standard in that rule, the court is going to respectfully deny the motion. Okay, anything else that anyone would like to take up today before I take up a few items?
No, Your Honor.
Not at this time, Judge. Obviously, I'm discussing with Mr. Madden his case and whether he's going to testify or not. And once that decision is made, that'll obviously be something that I'm not sure what this county does or you yourself, Your Honor, but that may have to go on the record.
Very well.
But nothing other than that.
All right, well, that brings me to the jury instructions that I wanted to discuss with you. And in those instructions, we have started out by saying that Mr. Madden would not testify, but certainly we will amend that if, in fact, he chooses to exercise his right to testify. So I'll have that language prepared to go either way based upon what happens with the case as we proceed. Other than that, Mr. Burris, Mr. Hahn, do either of you have any comments, corrections, or requests to the draft jury instructions that I have provided?
I don't believe so at this time, Your Honor. We don't know what.
Sure, and I understand we probably have to conference again, but I just want to have them in the best position possible so that they're easy for us to modify and alter as we proceed. Did you have anything that you wanted to change or add, Mr. Wilder?
Judge, I don't see anything with what's printed out here. However, based on some of the testimony, there is a potential that we may be requesting an instruction on voluntary manslaughter. I will
right.
certainly file something as a formal record, but other than what was printed out, I don't see anything in there at this point. But if anything additional like that instruction is requested, I will certainly file something and obviously bring it to the court's attention.
All right. Well, then I will leave them unchanged at this point, and if the defense chooses to present a case after that, we'll conference again and see if we need to make any other changes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we recess for the day?
I assume it would be the court's intention to try and get this, this case to the jury by sometime tomorrow. We'll stay as late as we're going to stay.
If we are still presenting evidence or doing closing arguments, or if we're not finished with those things, I would anticipate asking the jurors if they would like to stay or not. If we're in deliberations, likewise, I will ask them if they wish to stay. So I'm largely going to leave it up to the jurors. So if you would be prepared to stay past business hours, if that's how they choose to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't have anything right now.
All right. All right. We'll see you all tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.